Hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad, episode 19, where we are going to read book 19. Now, last week, on Thursday, Achilles was grieving for the death of Patroclus, and Thetis, his mother, went to Hephaestus, the god who crafts all the incredible things that the gods use, and she asked him to make her son a set of brilliant armor. And in fact, that armor and shield were so brilliant that took about half the book to read just what was on the shield, an entire world, a world which, to my interpretation, shows what Achilles will miss if he goes to fight Hector. So, with that, I think, let's see. Yep, the armor was just finished. And, and this, not to forget form, but this show, I'm using this mug, which shows a samurai on horseback. It's a little chipped at the top there. But samurai, incidentally, they are all known for their swords, but they started off as cavalry archers. So, and if you look, this has nothing to do with ancient Greece, but you look at the size of that bow that he's holding there. It's really quite interesting. And the tassels along the sides of the horse and the way the stirrups work are actually, for as artsy-fartsy as this image is actually pretty accurate to what they would have had. So it's one of the mugs that I like. So I hope you have something nice to drink. And let me just double check to make sure that our live chat is going well. Seems to be. Oh, yep, Gorm Darth Kaush. It's starting, that's right. Okay. Very good, everyone. And so, we shall begin. Iliad 19. Dawn, shrouded in saffron, rose out of the deep water with light for immortals and humans alike. And Thetis came to the ships with Hephaestus' gifts. She found her son lying beside his Patroclus, wailing, and around him his many friends mourning. The silvery goddess stood in their midst, took his hand, whispered his name, and said to him, "Achilles, you must let him rest. No matter our grief, this man was gentled by the gods. But you, my son, my darling, take this glorious armor from Hephaestus, so very beautiful no man has ever worn anything like it." She spoke, and when she set the armor before Achilles, all of the metalwork clattered and chimed. The Myrmidons shuddered, and to a man could not bear to look at it. But Achilles, when he saw it, felt his rage seep deeper into his bones, and his lids narrowed and lowered over eyes that glared like a white-hot steel flame. He turned the polished weapons the god had given him over and over in his hands, and felt pangs of joy at all its intricate beauty. And his words rose on wings to meet his mother. My mother, a god has given me these weapons. No mortal could have made them, and it is time I arm myself in them. But I'm afraid for Patroclus, afraid that flies will infest his wounds and breed worms in his body, now the life is gone, and his flesh turned foul and rotten." The silver-footed goddess answered, "Do not let that trouble you, child. I will protect him from the swarming flies that infest humans slain in war. Even if he should die out for a full year, his flesh would still be as firm or better. But call an assembly now. Renounce your rage against Agamemnon. Arm yourself for war and put on your strength." Saying this, she multiplied his heroic temper. Then she dripped ambrosia and ruby nectar through Patroclus' nostrils to keep his flesh firm. And then Achilles went along the shore, etched in sunlight, and shouted so loud that not only the heroes came out, but all those too who had spent the war among the encamped ships, all the pilots and oarsmen and stewards and cooks, they all came to the assembly then, because Achilles, who had abstained a long time, was back. Limping along were the two veterans, battle-scarred Diomedes and brilliant Odysseus, badly wounded, using their spears as crutches. They came in and sat at the front of the assembly, and behind them came the warlord Agamemnon, wounded himself, that spear thrust from Coon, son of Antenor, in a hard-fought battle. When all of the Greeks were gathered together, swift-footed Achilles rose and addressed them. "Well, son of Atreus, are either of us better off for this anger that has eaten our hearts away like acid, this bitter quarrel over a girl? Artemis should have shot her aboard my ship the day I pillaged Lyrnessus and took her. Far fewer Greeks would have gone down in the dust under Trojan hands while I nursed my grudge. Hector and the Trojans are better off, but the Greeks, I think they will remember our quarrel forever. But we'll let all that be, no matter how it hurts, and conquer our pride, because we must. I hereby end my anger. There is no need for me to rage relentlessly. But let's move quickly now to get our troops back into battle so I can confront the Trojans and test their will to bivouac among our ships. They will more likely be thankful to rest their knees at day's end if any of them gets out of this alive." He spoke, and the Greeks cheered. Peleus' great son had renounced his rage. And then the warlord Agamemnon, from where he sat, without rising among them, "Friends, Danaan heroes, servants of Ares, it is right to listen to one who stands to speak, and unseemly for even a skilled orator to interrupt him. Even if he could make himself heard above the crowd, he would be at a disadvantage. What I have to say is for the son of Peleus, but I want each of you to mark my words. There's not a Greek here who has not said spiteful things about me. But I am not to blame. Zeus's and fate and the dark avenger who put a fit of madness on me in public the day I robbed Achilles of his prize. But what could I do? Gods decide everything. Zeus's eldest daughter is the goddess Ate, who blinds everyone, a deadly power. She has delicate feet, not made for the ground, but for treading on the skulls of men as she afflicts them. Now and again she pins one down. Once she even blinded Zeus, who is, they say, the best of all, human or divine, even him. Hera, being female, hoodwinked him on the day Alcmena was due to give birth to mighty Heracles in coronated Thebes. Zeus had made this boast to all the gods. Hear me, all you gods and goddesses, while I say to you what is on my mind. This day shall Eileithyia, midwife goddess, bring to light a man who shall rule his land, one of the race of men who are of my own blood. And his lady Hera said to him craftily, Liar, you will never make this story come true. I dare you to swear me a great oath, Olympian, that whoever shall fall between a woman's legs today, provided he is one of your own bloodline, really will rule over all his neighbors. She spoke, and Zeus did not see through this trick, but swore a mighty oath, blinded as he was. Hera shot down from the peak of Olympus and came to Argos in Achaea, where she knew that the strong wife of Sthenelus, Perseus' son, was in the 7th month of her pregnancy. This child Hera brought to light prematurely, but delayed Alcmena's holding back the birth spirits. Then she brought the news to Zeus herself. Father Zeus, Lord of Lightning, important news. A man has been born who will rule the Argives. Eurystheus, born to Sthenelus, Perseus' son, of your own bloodline, fit to rule the Argives. This rankled deep in Zeus's heart. He seized Ate by her rich bright hair, angry as can be, and swore a great oath that she would never again come to Olympus or to starry heaven. Whirling her around, he threw her from the sky, and she fell quickly to the fields of men. The very thought of her would make him groan, especially when he saw his own dear son performing unseemly labors for Eurystheus. That's how I felt when I saw great Hector slaughtering Argives at the sterns of our ships. I could not forget Ate, who had made me blind. Yes, I was blind. Zeus robbed me of my wits, but I want to make reparation generously. Rouse yourself and your soldiers for battle. I am here to promise you all the gifts Odysseus proposed in your hut last night. Or wait if you wish, though you are eager for war, while my men start bringing things from my ship, so you can see that my gifts will please your heart. And Achilles, strong and swift, answered him, Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, whether you offer me gifts as is right, or keep them is your concern. War is mine. Let's not waste any more time with speeches. We have work to do. I want each of you to see Achilles fighting on the front line, destroying the Trojan ranks with his spear. Have that image in your mind as you fight your man. Odysseus, the wily thinker, answered him, Achilles, we know how good you are, but don't send our men out to fight the Trojans without any food in their stomachs. It's not going to be a short battle once the two sides close and start feeling the god's breath working beside them. You should have our men go to their ships for food and wine, to get their strength up. No one can fight all day until sunset on an empty stomach. He may have the heart, but as hunger and thirst creep up on him, his arms get heavy and his knees go slack. But a man who has had his fill of food and wine can fight all day long with confidence and stay strong until the last man quits. So come, dismiss the troops and have them prepare their meal. As for the gifts, let Lord Agamemnon bring them out here, so that the whole army can see them. This will warm your heart. And he should stand and swear a public oath that he has not gone to the woman's bed. You, Achilles, should be gracious about this, and then he should complete his amends by feasting you richly, so you have all your due. Next time, son of Atreus, you will act more justly. But there is no cause at all for offense when kings make their amends for unprovoked anger. And the warlord Agamemnon answered him, Son of Laertes, I'm glad to hear your words. You have laid it all just as it should be. I am ready and willing to swear this oath, and I will not perjure myself. But Achilles should wait here, eager as he is for war. All should wait here assembled until the gifts come from my hut, and we swear solemn oaths. And I lay this charge upon you, Odysseus. Choose the finest young men in all the army, and bring from my ships all the gifts we promised Achilles yesterday, the women too. And Talthybius will prepare a boar for me to sacrifice before the army to Helios and Zeus. But swift-footed Achilles answered him, Son of Atreus, most glorious Agamemnon, you should do all this at some other time when there is a break in the war, and when my rage is not so great. Hector has beaten these men to death. They are lying here mangled. He has the glory, and you two want us to eat? If it were up to me, I'd have the troops out there fighting unfed, no food all day. When the sun goes down, we can have a big meal, our shame avenged. Until then, no food or drink will pass my lips, at least. My comrade is dead, lying in my hut, mangled with bronze, his feet turned toward the door, and around him our friends grieve. Nothing matters to me now but killing, and blood, and men in agony. And Odysseus, with his many wiles, son of Peleus, strongest of the Achaeans, far stronger than me, certainly with a spear. Yet I might be better than you in counsel, since I have lived longer and come to know more. Have the patience to listen to my words. Men quickly have their fill of battle, where moving blades litter the ground with stalks, but there's very little to reap after Zeus decides the price in human lives with the tip of his scales. We can't mourn the dead with our bellies. There are too many corpses, more each day. When would anyone get time off from grief? No, we have to bury all our dead, steel our hearts, and mourn them for a day. The survivors must remember to eat and drink, so we can go on fighting day after day, until we wear out the enemy's bronze skin. Let no man hold back awaiting some other call. This is the call. There will be hell to pay for any man who stays here with the ships. Now let's move out. This is war. Odysseus spoke and was off, taking with him Nestor's sons, Antilochus and Thrasymedes, along with Meriones and Lycomedes, Meges, the Dulichian, Thoas the Aetolian, and Melanippus. They all went straight to Agamemnon's hut. No sooner said than done. They brought out 7 tripods, as promised, a dozen bright cauldrons, and as many horses, and they quickly led out the women, faultless in their handiwork, 7 of these, and Briseis made 8. Then Odysseus weighed out the full 10 talents of gold, and led back the youths, who carried the gifts, and set them in the middle of the assembly grounds. Agamemnon rose up, and Talthybius, whose voice was like a god's, stood beside him, holding a boar. The son of Atreus drew the knife that hung by his sword scabbard, and cut the boar's hairs, then lifted his hands to Zeus. He prayed, and all the Greeks sat silently, in the proper way, each man listening to his king, as he spoke in prayer, looking at the sky. By Zeus, my witness first, highest and best of gods, and earth and sun, and the Furies who underground take vengeance on men who break their oaths. I swear I never laid a hand on the girl Briseis, either to bed her or for anything else, but that she stayed untouched in my quarters. If any of what I swear is false, may the gods torment me as a transgressor of oaths. And he slashed the boar's throat with ruthless bronze. Talthybius whirled and threw the carcass into the open sea to be food for fish. Then Achilles rose and addressed the war-loving Achaeans. Father Zeus, great is the blindness you send to men. else Atreus' son never would have roused my rage or insisted on leading the girl away against my will. Somehow it has pleased Zeus that many Greeks should die. Now go to your meal, so we can join battle." The assembly broke up, and the men scattered, each to his own ship. The Myrmidons got busy with the gifts, bringing them to Achilles' ship. They stored it all in his huts, left the women there, and proudly drove the horses to the herd. Briseis stood there like golden Aphrodite. But when she saw Patroclus' mangled body, she threw herself upon him and wailed. In a high, piercing voice, with her nails she tore her breast and soft neck and lovely face. And this woman, so like a goddess, cried in anguish, "My poor Patroclus, you were so dear to me. When I left this hut you were alive, and now I find you, the army's leader, dead when I come back. So it is for me always, evil upon evil. I have seen my husband, the man my father and mother gave me to, mangled with sharp bronze before my city. And my 3 brothers, all from the same mother, brothers I loved, they all died that day. But you wouldn't let me cry when Achilles killed my husband and destroyed Minos' city. Wouldn't let me cry. You told me you'd make me Achilles' bride. Told me you'd take me on a ship to Thea for a wedding among the Myrmidons. I will never stop grieving for you, forever sweet." Thus Briseis and the women mourned with her, for Patroclus, yes, but each woman also for her own private sorrows. Around Achilles the Achaean elders gathered, begging him to eat. But he refused them, groaning, "I beg you, my friends, aren't any of you listening? Don't keep asking me to satisfy my heart with food or drink before it is time. My grief is too great. I will stay as I am and endure until sunset." And he waved them off. Only Atreus' 2 sons remained with him, along with Odysseus, Nestor, and the old charioteer Phoenix, trying to comfort him in his grief's extremity. But he would not be comforted. His heart would ache until he lost himself in war's blood-stained mouth. Memories welled up and caught in his throat. "There was a time, my ill-fated beloved friend, you would serve me a fine dinner in this hut, deftly and quickly, while the army hurried to bring war's sorrow to the horse-breaking Trojans. Now you lie here a mangled corpse, and my heart fasts from the food and drink that are here, out of grief for you. I could not suffer worse, not even if I learned my father were dead, who perhaps is weeping back in Thea right now because he misses his son, who is off fighting on Trojan soil. For Helen, at whom we all shudder. Not even if it were my son, Neoptolemus, who is being reared for me in Scyrus, if indeed my dear child is still alive. I had hoped until now that I alone would perish at Troy, and that you would return and take my boy in your swift black ship away from Scyrus, and show him all my things back home in Thea. For Peleus by now must be dead and gone. Or if he does still live, he draws his breath in pain, clinging to a shred of life and always expecting the grim message that will tell him I am dead. He wept, and the elders added their laments to this, each remembering what he had left at home. Zeus saw them in their grief, and pitying them, spoke to Athena, these feathered words: "My child, have you deserted your warrior? Do you no longer have any thought for Achilles? He is mourning his friend, sitting there in front of his upswept holes. Everyone else has gone off to dinner, but he refuses to eat. Go drip some nectar and savory ambrosia into his breast, so he will not weaken with hunger." Athena needed no encouragement. She flew from the crystal sky like a shrill raptor and pounced on Achilles. The other Achaeans were busy arming for battle. Athena distilled nectar and ambrosia into Achilles' chest, so that grim hunger would not weaken his knees, and then was gone, back to her father's house, while the Greeks poured out from their beached ships. Snow flurries can come so thick and fast from the cold northern sky that the wind that bears them becomes an icy, blinding glare. So too the gleaming, polished weaponry. The helmets, shields, spears, and plated corselets, all the bronze paraphernalia of war that issued from the ships. The rising glare reflected off the coppery sky, and the land beneath laughed under the arcing metallic glow. A deep bass, thrumming noise from the marching feet. And like a bronze bolt in the center, Achilles, who now began to arm. His eyes glowed like white-hot steel, and he gritted his teeth against the grief that had sunk into his bones, and every motion he made in putting on his armor, forged for him in heaven, was an act of passion directed against the Trojans. Clasping on his shins the greaves trimmed in silver at the ankles, strapping the corselet onto his chest, slinging the silver-studded bronze sword around his shoulder, and then lifting the massive, heavy shield that spilled light all around it as if it were the moon, or a fire that has flared up in a lonely settlement high in the hills of an island, reflecting light on the faces of men who have put out to sea and must watch helplessly as rising winds bear them away from their dear ones. So too the terrible beauty of Achilles' shield, a fire in the sky. He lifted the helmet and placed it on his head, and it shone like a star with the golden horsehair Hephaestus had set thickly on the crest, rippling in waves. He tested the fit and flex of the armor, sprinting on the sand, and found that the metal lifted him like wings. He put from its case his father's spear, the massive, heavy spear that only Achilles could handle, made of Pelian ash, which the centaur Chiron had brought down from Mount Pelion and given to Achilles' father to be the death of heroes. Automedon and Alcimus harnessed the horses, cinched the leather straps, fit the bits in their jaws, and drew the reins back to the jointed chariot. Automedon picked up the bright lash and jumped into the car, and behind him Achilles stepped in, shining in his war gear like an amber sun, and in a cold voice he cried to his father's horses, Xanthus and Balius, Podarges' famous colts, see that you bring your charioteer back safe this time, when we have had enough of war, and not leave him for dead, as you left Patroclus. And from beneath the yoke, Xanthus spoke back, hooves shimmering, his head bowed so low that his mane swept the ground, as Hera, the white-armed goddess, gave him a voice. This time we will save you, mighty Achilles, this time. But your hour is near. We are not to blame, but a great God and strong fate. nor was it slowness or slackness on our part that allowed the Trojans to despoil Patroclus. No, the best of gods, fair-haired Leto's son, killed him in the front lines and gave Hector the glory. As for us, we could outrun the west wind, which men say is the swiftest. But it is your destiny to be overpowered by a mortal and a god. Xanthus said this. Then the Furies stopped his voice, and Achilles, greatly troubled, answered him, I don't need you to prophesy my death, Xanthus. I know in my bones I will die here, far from my father and mother. Still, I won't stop until I have made the Trojans sick of war. And with a cry he drove his horses to the front. And that is episode 19, or book 19. And I highly encourage you all to come back for episode 20. We have a suit-up sequence in this one. I hit the camera. We have a suit-up sequence. How many times have we seen in films Batman or even the Avengers or so on and so forth get ready? They put on the suit in the Batcave and ride on out in the Batmobile. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. How interesting is so much of what happens here. Agamemnon, once again, never taking full responsibility for what he did. It's like, oh, the gods did it. But we know. We know because we were there in book 1 when it was just him. We saw the other gods who were around when Athena came and stopped Achilles from killing Agamemnon. Where was Zeus's daughter that Agamemnon is blaming? Both of these guys are shifting blame here. How classic. Achilles saying, like, we both need to renounce our rage. It's like, yeah, I guess we have a problem. Like, that's, I hate it when, like, in real life when people do this, when someone is talking toward me and says, like, you know, so often we do this thing that I personally have a problem with that not everybody actually has as an issue, but to make it seem like it's not as big a deal, I'm going to dilute the guilt by trying to spread it on you. It's like, don't put that on me, you know. So we've got both of these guys doing the same thing. Achilles feels mightily guilty for the death of Patroclus. He sent him out there, and because of this other thing going on, his friends died. It's like, you know, no one thinks that Agamemnon didn't mess up. Everyone knows Agamemnon's messed up, and that Achilles had a good reason to be angry. But after a while, everyone was just like, Achilles, can you put it on the back burner for us? We're dying here. No, I'm going to stay here. He's offering you gifts. The best people in the army are coming. It's like, no, I think I'm going to leave. All right. It's like, it's gotten to the point where Achilles' reaction has exceeded the slight. He should have taken those gifts. And he didn't. Until it was too late. Now he doesn't want those things. He doesn't care. He barely even wants glory at this point. All he wants is to make the Trojans sick of war. He's been mourning outside Patroclus, he's been mourning around Patroclus and for like all night, and he's upset, and nothing is able, it seems, to help him get past that. And Odysseus says something very interesting. He's like, we gotta eat. And Achilles says, no, let's go now. I'm not even going to eat anything. And Odysseus basically says, dude, people die all the time in war. If we didn't eat whenever people died, we'd starve to death. We have to get on with it. Look how many bodies there are out there. It's like he's sensitive about it, but he basically says Patroclus was not the first guy to die in this war, Achilles. And Achilles not eating is him essentially rejecting life itself. He's pursuing his death now. Beforehand, he was like, I don't know what I want to do with my time. And now he's like, the last thing he says is, I know I'm gonna die, but I'm not gonna stop. I am going to kill them until they are sick of it. And that's a hell of a thing to say. And you know what? I've definitely known a lot of people like that. It's like, how many times have even, like, okay, I'm not going to do what I said I hate earlier, like, haven't you done this? No. But self-sabotage. Yeah, it's like, I know it's going to hurt me a bit, but I just want to get you. All right? That's a pretty normal thing for people to do. It doesn't totally make sense because there's not even that's where it becomes unnatural in a weird way. It's like, it's not like you're getting back at someone out of self-preservation. It's like, I'm taking you with me. Scary. But I think maybe the most interesting character moment here for me is Briseis, who, like, we hear, well, there's two moments. I'll get to Briseis in a second. One is Achilles has a son, and he talks about, like, I hoped I'd die here and that Patroclus would raise my son, basically. And show him all my cool stuff. Show him my old guitar that I had in college, whatever, show him all my stuff, all the things I won in war, and be like the cool uncle who raised my kid, but I think Achilles is even not coming back to his son. He says straight up, like, the death of Patroclus honestly hit me more than the death of my son or father would. It's like, whoa, but you know what? I've met people like that. Soldiers, I mean. One of the harshest things I've heard a soldier say was that he was, and from what I understand, this is not uncommon, was that he was closer with his battle brothers than he was with his wife and kids. And I said, like, what do you mean by that? And he said, like, I did things with those guys that if my wife found out about it, she'd leave me. I was like, whoa. And he told me what some of those things were. And it was pretty intense. But one of the things he said was, when he was talking about the bond that brothers in arms share, and that he has specifically, he said, like, it was a really, like, exposing moment for me, was when I was there with another friend of mine. I was working at a Boy Scout camp, but this guy was on staff. And me and this friend of mine, who were both Eagle Scouts in the same troop, who knew each other since we were, like, I don't know, 15 or something like that. We were both sitting there talking to this guy about just everything. And he says, here's the thing. He's like, you guys have jobs. Like, you work, you go around. And we're like, yeah. He's like, okay, I got a job too. He says, if one of my battle brothers called me and said, hey, I need your help with something, I would leave everything. I would not show up to work. I would leave, and I'd go all the way across the country or wherever he is just to be there, even if it wasn't a big deal. I'd drop everything for that guy, no matter what. And I hadn't really thought about that completely in that way before. I was like, I'm sitting here with a friend of mine who's like one of my best friends, and I was just like, we were kind of like both not looking at each other, kind of like, I guess if it was really important, I'd, get rid of my livelihood. I'd be like, do you really need me to do this? Like, here's what you're asking. Is like, And I was like, man. And in a weird way, the one of the impacts that conversation had on me was just thinking about realizing that I did want to have friendships like that. And it's, you know, yeah. But yeah, it one of the weird things is like whenever we hear about different tragedies of like different people dying in this book, you hear about the thing that they probably all knew about that person. It's like you live in there for like 9 years, and the person's like, oh yeah, I got my dad back home, and someday I'm gonna help him with the farm or whatever. It's like this is the stuff that people knew about each other too. And but moving on, I think the most interesting character moment for me personally is Briseis here, who we get her life story in like one she gets one line and we get everything in it. And she's mourning the death of Patroclus. Like she's tearing her face and she's like freaking out. And it's heartbreaking, but then one of the most poignant lines in this whole incredible book for me is each woman... Oh, hang on a second. Let me turn that off. Sorry. The always professional show. Silence. Anyhow, so one of the most poignant lines in the whole book is each woman, where it says, "Thus Briseis, and the woman mourned with her. For Patroclus, yes, but each woman also for her own private sorrows." Think about what's going on there. We get a glimpse into it with Briseis when she's talking about my brothers who I loved from the same mom, like all killed on the same day as my husband. Like that story was likely basically what all those other women had gone through. All right. It's a harsh world, that we're looking at here, where what kind of a tumultuous place do you have to be in where the closest person to you is the best friend of the guy who killed your husband, and brothers, and sacked your city, like burned your home down? I think people like it's sometimes hard to get into the mindset of like what it's like when your city is sacked. That just means like, okay, if you live in Pittsburgh, can you imagine looking out over at Pittsburgh from Mount Washington and it's just flat and the rubble is pushing off into the Three Rivers? Okay. And you see people moving around like ants. There's fires. There's people getting cut down, let off in lines, tied up. People being raped openly. And then, some of the trees like beyond and around on fire. A couple of the bridges have fallen down into the river. There's boats, with your enemies on them all around. It's like, that's what that would be like. Okay, one of the worst things that can happen, I think, in the world, of all the crazy, horrible things I've read, some of the worst things I have ever heard about have to do with what happens when a city is sacked. And that's not just ancient world, okay? Whether you go through the ancient world, the medieval world, or up through the Second World War, okay, or beyond. When a city gets sacked, it's like it's like what someone said, it's worse than hell because there's no innocent people in hell. Anyhow, but yeah, we're gearing up, we're suiting up, ready, and the horse gets to speak. Xanthus, what an interesting moment. What an interesting moment. Achilles chiding these immortal beasts, and then one speaks back and basically says, "We did the best we could. And what we did was actually kind of good enough. But that wasn't fate." for us to bring him back, and you're gonna die. If you hitch us up and you roll on out of here, okay, it's gonna lead to your death. Plain and simple. And Achilles is just like, I know. Go. Wow. Okay, so I think that's about it for my commentary, analysis, freak out, whatever. And I'm going to go now into the chat. And we've been active in the chat. How wonderful. I do so love going through the chat. So Stacy actually beat my initial comment. Whenever I start this, I always put a little thing that, hey guys, join the chat or whatever. But before I even typed that in, she clicked on there and said early and totally stoked for this episode. So the best fan award for this episode goes to Stacy. So thank you very much. And then we have me. Hurrah, begin the flurry of words. And then Joe says, what's up, fellow Iliaders? And here, just in time, it's starting, says another person. That's wonderful. And Benji the Koi Boy, where have you been? Okay, says, he's telling us right now. Benji the Koi Boy says, I'm still catching up, so I can't stay. I'm just here to say I like Peter's beard. Oh, well, thank you, Ben. Well, thank you very much. I'm trying to grow it out to do one of those ancient Greek styles as a point for how this, helping the show. Goram Darth Cal says, it's a dandy beard indeed. Well, you are all lovely, aren't you? Thank you. Stacy says, Patroclus, the army's leader. Yes, interesting line. Well, here's what I think that Stacy says, Patroclus, the army's leader. Here's what I think Briseis might mean by that. This is just interpretation. This isn't looked in the back and this is what it means. The only person who could get Achilles to do anything was probably Patroclus. And Achilles, when it got down to it, decided how things were going to go. When he stopped fighting, everything went wrong. So perhaps that's what she meant by that. I suppose it's possible Homer forgot that, or maybe she lived with Agamemnon for a few minutes and it's just like, this guy's not the real army's leader. Maybe her behind the scenes look at what was going on as someone who was going to become the bride of Achilles, who spent time in his hut and listened to all the other men going about talking and giving counsel and everything. Maybe that's her assessment. That's interesting. I'm glad you said that. I didn't think of it that way. So, let's see. Joe says, I can just picture the movie. The montage of Achilles putting on his new armor. Yes. Yes. Goram Darth Cal says, gearing up montages. LOL, yes, Joel. I think Peter's enthusiastic narration really helps with the visualization. Well, thank you. I do like this. I do think the text lends itself to that kind of thing, but I am having a blast. Oh, Joe says, definitely. Why are you all being so nice to me? Thank you. Joe says, I'd have a hard time eating anything too if there was a rotting corpse around. LOL. Interesting. Isn't it fun that I have something related to that? Some of you may know about A1 Steak Sauce, which is not sponsoring this episode, but A1 Steak Sauce, if you are listening, hit me up. A1 Steak Sauce was invented during the American Civil War, and what I heard, I don't know if this part is true. Like, it was made during the Civil War. I think it was 1864 or 3, maybe something. During the Civil War, they made A1 steak sauce. Now, I don't know if this next part is true, but what I heard was that the demand for steak sauce like that came because preserving meat out to where the battles were was very difficult. And so the meat that the soldiers were eating would go bad and would start to rot and be nasty. It's another horrible part of war. And so they would take steak sauce and pour that over it to mask the rotting taste of meat that they made. So I don't know if that's totally it, but yeah, people, you know, when it's your day job, you make do. Okay, so Stacy says Xanthus blamed Zeus. Who else knows Zeus is to blame? Wait, Xanthus. Yeah, Xanthus blames Zeus. Who else knows Zeus is to blame? Well, with Zeus, Zeus is sort of like is the guy who enforces fate, and also Xanthus is an immortal, a horse. So I don't know, maybe he's just clued in for that. Agamemnon is sort of shifting blame in a more like he makes up a story. Here's she did it. It was this person. Oh, remember Hercules and oh, even Zeus was deceived by Hera. So I mean, I'm just like Zeus. He casts himself. What a victimized whatever. Okay. All right. Bubba the musician says that seemed a lot shorter than usual. Yes, this is a shorter book. But it's intense. Joe says, yes, take responsibility, Agamemnon. I'd say he's narcissistic, but that's another Greek character, lol. Yes, what is it with responsibility that is so... Well, okay, so Stacy says, seems like Achilles wants to avenge Patroclus, but he also needs to do something to deal with his pain. The friend of my friend is my... Wait. The friend of my friend is my friend? Says Stacy. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. But, because that's definitely not true for me. I have friends who have lots of friends who I don't like. I don't know about lots, but so it was like I'm friends with them, not your friends for a reason. Whatever. Okay, so yeah, because it seems that Achilles. Here's the main point about this episode. Probably the most important thing is that Achilles renounces his rage in quotes, but he doesn't. He just redirects it. Achilles is still angry. He is in emotionally the same state. Okay, instead of looking at Agamemnon. Okay, now he's turned and he's just like, kill Hector, kill the Trojans, and his anger has just been multiplied. You know, it's like, so he was so angry before he was willing to let a bunch of people that he lived with die. Because he didn't want, to take a smack on the cheek. And, but now that the most important person in his world is dead, his pain has just been multiplied. He hasn't renounced his anger. That's not true. Okay? He's like, just because that's one of the things, that just because a character says something in this book doesn't mean it's true. Okay, they might even think it's true, but that doesn't mean it's true. Achilles is wrong. He has not renounced his rage. He's not mad at Agamemnon anymore, but he's not really happy with anybody, is he? And he's just redirected his rage at the Trojans. So, there we are. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode 19, and it pains me to say that we are almost done with this book. There are 24 books in Iliad, and next episode is 20. Yikes. Man, I really don't want to stop reading this book, but I have started to think about what I'm going to... I don't want to act like it's the end yet, but I have started to think about different things that I can present. I've really enjoyed doing this series. Iliad is my favorite book, but I'd also like to continue doing stuff as well. And I have a few ideas, but if there is a work that it's possible for me to get permission to do for this series, go ahead and leave a comment on next episode. Take a few days to think about it, and or send it to the Facebook page for Peter Presents Iliad, or whatever, if you've got ideas. I've got a few ideas, and I'm going to do whatever I want, but it's I would be open to any ideas or suggestions, or if you know an author who has a book that I would very much like, who you think would be cool with me reading it like this, and I can actually get permission to do it, let me know. So, all right, well, thank you very much. Let's see. Stacy has a closing comment here. says, explaining her comment of the friend of my friend is my friend, says, friend of Agamemnon and Achilles, finally hanging it up, however awkwardly or poorly, they already shared the enemy of my enemy. Friend of Agamemnon and Achilles. I'm not sure where the. Alright, I don't know exactly what you're saying with the friend of Agamemnon and Achilles finally hanging it up, however awkwardly or poorly, they already shared the enemy of my enemy. Maybe you mean like Agamemnon and Achilles were both friends with Patroclus, but I don't think Agamemnon ever really cared that much about Patroclus to begin with. So I don't know what that is. Alright, but anyhow, thank you all for being active in the chat. I've had a wonderful time. I hope you have an excellent evening and a good week in general, and I really would encourage you to be here for episode 20 this Thursday. So, have a wonderful night, and hope you had a good drink, and if not, get yourself one. Cheers.